Welcome to Make More Marbles. My name is Brad Hart, and we're here to interview the game changers, the future makers, the co-collaborators and creators who are here to collaborate with one another towards a better future for all of us. Enjoy the show. We've got a great guest coming up for you right now. Welcome to Make More Marbles. My name is Brad Hart, and today I am with Deepak. What's up, Deepak? How you doing, brother?
Hello, Brad. I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
All the way from India. What part of India are you in?
I am in the north of India in this very small, sleepy, quaint little city called Dehra Dun. It's a valley and it's gorgeous. And it's winter
Is it near
here.
the Uttar Pradesh, or is it what part of India?
Oh, absolutely opposite directions. Andhra
Oh,
Pradesh
got
is
it.
like south of India. And that is where I was last week. But yeah, it's quite far off from there.
So not like the Parvati Valley or any of that. If I'm mangling the words, I'm apologetic. I had a friend who was up there, who sadly went missing up there in the mountains
Oh,
last year. So I'm a little bit familiar with the area, literally because it was like a 24-hour period there where I was running a search and rescue mission to try to recover my friend. We
oh,
never did find him, but it was a whole thing. It was in the news. Somebody ended up rolling him for his bags and everything, and then killed him, and then killed themselves in police custody later. It was really horrible.
oh God.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't like that I know where that is, but that's why I know where that is. Great
Okay.
guy. Love you, Justin. Rest in peace. Anyway,
Mm.
he knew the risks, and he was living his life. I mean, if everybody could live a week of their life like he lived his whole life, yeah,
It
he
should
was
be
doing that
worth
through
it.
a scout.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, I didn't mean to go that way, but sometimes they just do.
What a
Um,
start. You've triggered a
what a
good
start. Yeah, way to tank the interview.
story.
No, I feel like it's important to talk about whatever's coming up when it comes up. Otherwise, you press it
Mm.
down, and I'd rather
Yeah.
live with abandon than die with regret. Anyway, so what you're working on in the world is really special, and I want to share that with the audience today. And I want to give them a little bit of a viewpoint into Project Fuel and what it does. But essentially, collects stories like the one I just shared,
Yes.
and uses those stories to fuel people towards greater heights and motivation and inspiration. Is that a pretty accurate statement?
Yes. And I mean, I would say I would take the part of the story and say life lessons, because that's the moral of the story. A lot of times we hear anecdotes and stories from all around the world, but we get confused with the morals of the story. And I think that's important because morals have stories and stories don't have morals. So life lessons, we collect life lessons from around the world and design them into interactive and performance-based modules and projects. And yeah, basically I teach human wisdom
Human
as
wisdom. You
actually
collect and teach human wisdom. I love that.
wisdom.
That's beautiful. So,
Yes.
all right, then I would imagine you're a pretty good storyteller. Why don't you catch us up on your life story so far as the hero's journey, as far as what you've learned, what you've accomplished, and what you've learned, become along the way that we're,
Mhm. Wow. So my journey, Brad, actually with Project Fuel started with my mother, who was pulled out of school in grade 5 by her grandmother, who back in the 60s didn't let any of the daughters of the house study, which was prevalent as a stereotype, as a bias against girl child in India back in the day. So she never had the opportunity to go to school. But growing up, when I was growing up, she would tell me and my sister to study pretty damn hard because she didn't have the resources or the opportunity. And I never believed her. I thought she's the biggest liar in the world because she's pretty smart. You got to meet my mother. She can run the world. I think. Uh, uh, and in that capacity, I never believed her, and I've always questioned of which school she went to. And at age 14, I remember I confronted her and I said, I have found out that you are a liar, and I would like to know that what has been your educational qualifications. And she said, no, I really didn't go to school. So I said, how do you know so much? And she said, life is teaching me, and I'm paying attention to that. Of course, to my 14-year-old brain, that seemed like such a metaphoric, philosophical answer that I thought, poor ignorant woman, you know, knowing less that I would be running the career of my life and being a professional based on the same ideology a couple of years later.
She
All
was
my
smarter than you
questions,
even realized at the time.
absolutely. So my mother now questions me and says all the checks that have been accounted for you should be on her name because it's her idea initially, and that I doubted. But yeah, so I mean, I was really inspired by someone who was paying attention to life and was living it. Made me believe that if she was learning by simply living, that means everyone who was living was learning something. And what could that be? And turns out the population of the world is 7.536 billion
And
as
most
of
of them live
yesterday.
in India and China.
And most of them live in India and China, closer home. Uh, and really diverse and amazing in that capacity. So I thought, why not to document that? So I mean, of course, to my younger self, the idea was that by the time I'm 17, I'll have so much wisdom that I'll make no mistakes, and would be, probably living it all right. But as I grew with the life lessons and with the learnings, I came to realize that the point of collecting and learning from human wisdom was to not avoid mistakes, but not to make the same mistake that 4 million people already made and learned from. Do something better, make newer mistakes, make unique obstacles, and forge into new areas, so that you don't sit and say, 4 million people knew that. I wish I knew
Fail
better.
better. Yeah, exactly. There's a great quote
Exactly.
that always comes to mind. It's one of my favorites. It's a fool repeats his mistakes, a wise man learns from them, but a genius learns from the mistakes of others.
Exactly. So yeah, that there you go. So you condensed it in that. So that's how my journey really started. And over time, I was given at age 17 a book deal offer. They said, let's print all your life lessons into a book and put it out. And that was my fear, that it would end up being a quote on on the wall or in a page. And now we live in a world of Instagram motivation. So you wake up and you scroll down so much of optimism brewed for you and packaged for you, that I thought people would not live what somebody has lived and shared. So I started designing these life lessons into mini experiences of theater, poetry, creative writing, performance art. So someone actually does a game or plays an exercise and then gets to learn what someone learned maybe in 100 years or 18 years of their lives, or maybe 5 years of their life. And the methodology sort of grew from there. It was pretty word of mouth, because I didn't have a Facebook page for, I think, first 6 years of my working through Project Fuel. And it grew on from there, and eventually kind of just people joined in, and it became a movement, an initiative, an organization. And now the joy of my and many people's lives.
I love that, Deepak. And you're really giving people that fuel, like you said, to move faster, to learn from others' mistakes, to accomplish their goals and their dreams. Can you give us some examples of the ways that people have been transformed by this?
Okay, sure. So, wow, I'm just trying to think. I've
Or
taught
what's your
more than,
favorite one? Just like, give me your best shot.
Brad. Brad. That's the best part. But my favorite one changes 10 seconds. One per second in that
Awesome. I love
capacity.
it.
Because we get so many by the day. But let me think of what's my latest favorite. And maybe I can tell you about. Oh yes, I'll tell you my latest favorite. It is wash your socks regularly. And the story behind the lesson is that the guy who was I met in France, he said that he, I mean, of course, wasn't washing his socks for a long time. And then one day he ran out of a pair. He had to go for an interview. He asked one of his friends, and he gave him a pink pair of socks. And he really didn't really like the color. That became the hot topic in his interview process. So they, instead of asking him about his qualifications, inquired him about his pink socks. So he said, my life lesson was that if you prepare and do your homework well in time. And as frivolous as that sounds, I like that someone calls that their life lessons. It really demands you to take notice of the mundane, the ordinary, and kind of facilitate space for even taking time out for that. So I like that life lesson. That's the first. The second that I really am enjoying these days is that try to relate to everyone with a sense of humor. This came from a woman from London. I met her in a refugee camp in Europe, and she said that um, that's the way to go about life, because if you keep feeling offended, if you keep feeling hurt, disappointed, or angry, you're going to be more bitter as a person. So every time now people get onto my nerves, instead of saying, how can you do this to me? I say, oh my goodness, this is so amusing. There are people in the world who would say that about me. Or that's somebody who thinks that way. This is funny, instead of how ridiculous. And I think
Mm,
that's one I'm really liking these days.
I love
Yeah.
it. So let's talk a little bit about the model, right? Because this has grown kind of as a grassroots thing that you started. Your mom gave you the inspiration. Let's talk a
Mm.
little bit about the business side of things. So how does it grow? How do you reach more people? Are you seeing a lot of virality? You guys advertise? How do people get involved with you? What are some of the ways which you drive revenue? Like, let's talk about the business for a second.
Sure. So, Project Fuel actually has grown quite organically. And that's one of the most beautiful aspects of it because it really resonates with people. So the reach, the audience, the members, the tribe, as I call it, is not made of people who have been pulled into it by heavy marketing or promotion, but have rather discovered it on their own. I can tell you, I have not spent more than $15 on promoting Project Fuel ever. Not
It's
even
pretty good.
$15. That I mean does say something that I definitely want it to be a more authentic and credible audience base than just a number, on the Facebook page. So in that capacity, I would say we have been able to reach through various resources. We do a lot of blog posts that are reshared around the world, projects. So one of the main primary sources of revenue of Project Fuel is the workshops that I conduct. These are exclusive modules on how to have a conversation, how to say goodbye. And each module is based on life lessons of people from around the world. So these become one kind of a curriculum that we execute with different groups, from classrooms to corporates to bigger organizations to NGOs. So that becomes one of the model. The other is the collaborative model, where we partner with artists, entrepreneurs, organizations to help their life lessons or their employees' life lessons or life lessons of other people in the world fit into their ecosystem and kind of assist and serve people. The third is, in some sense, larger capacity, the bigger projects we do through the year. So that's the Masterpiece Tour, that's the Wise Wall project. So these are specific projects where we get foundations as grants, or we get brands on board for sponsoring the project. So that becomes another thing. And recently, I'm so excited to tell you, very recently, like almost just 3 weeks back, we launched the online store of Project Fuel, which
Ah,
has
congratulations.
Thank you. So it's really exciting because it has some really meaningful resources that people have been buying for last 3 weeks. It's going pretty well. So yeah, those are some of the major sources of revenue for us at Fuel.
Okay, cool. So you have your message that goes out into the world. A lot of people come into you organically through various social media channels, I would imagine, and Googling and figuring out, I'm sure you have a lot of YouTube videos and things along that line. People
Mhm.
come in, they eventually end up investing in workshops. You do corporate, you do various NGOs and organizations. And then
Mhm.
finally, the value that you provide is how do we help people transform through life lessons and stories? Right? How do we help
Yes.
them be more effective in their careers and achieve their goals by not making so many
A-
mistakes, right? It's like just being prepared for the
And
lessons that are coming.
yes, and also not just learning from the gurus or the masters or the connoisseurs or the experts, but really learning from the people on the streets, you know.
Mm.
So I teach life lessons of sex workers to MBA graduates because they know how client servicing works. They're the masters of that. So you teach how to stay glamorous while staying plain by monks, because they look pretty fancy. Everybody, all photographers in the world, you can see in their portfolios have a monk picture right plugged in there. So
Okay. I'll bite. Tell me the sex worker one. I want to know what's the the secret of sex workers that works in regular business, or the glamorous but plain monks. I'd love to hear about it.
yes, no, absolutely. I mean, I can tell you, I've spent so much time with them. The first is that you value your own work. They've
Right.
said that, I mean, often whenever I get to interact with them, they said that the value is of the person, the works come secondary. So even when a client comes to them, they're very respectful of the work that they do, but they're also respectful of the person, the time they're spending with that. I'll tell you a quick story of perception and of interpretation. So, one of the life lessons from a sex worker is interpretation is a dangerous weapon. Use it wisely. And when I asked her how did she learn that, she said, if you see my life from the perspective of a Dehra Dun based person who doesn't live in Mumbai, where the red light area is where she lives, or a person sitting in LA, you would look at her story and say, oh my God, I pity you, or I'm so empathetic to you that you're a sex worker, sleeping with 30 men a day, earning this kind of revenue, and you were trafficked at the age of 12. And she said, now I've been pulled into this environment. I've lived all my life here. And she asked me, how much does a corporate person make? And I said, whatever, $600, $700 a month or something. And she said, I make more than that. And so I said, okay. And she said, you know what I do with that money? I have to pay my PIN. I have to pay the rent of the place I stay. I save a considerable amount of money for my kids because they're going to be going to college soon. I have invested money into 18 carts outside of the red light area. So the men who come to sleep with me have to buy things from those carts, whether that's food items, whether those normal items. And those cart people pay me every night. So she's an entrepreneur in the middle of a red light area.
She's a high earning entrepreneur reinvesting into the community and creating cash flow assets around her. That's incredible.
And imagine that as a beautiful case study for people who are entrepreneurs.
Well, and she's not upset about it. She's liberated, right? And in her look at it, she's like, hey, I have sex with dudes for money, but I make a lot of money and I make it an empowering story. It's not disempowering for her. And you might say, oh, I pity this woman. Why? She doesn't pity herself.
Yes, exactly. And that's one of the biggest learnings in the community is that a lot of women have accepted that and they do not appreciate our Masiha attitude. We go with that, oh, we are your saviors, everything is bad, and we are going to save you. Why? Well, she's been doing that since she was 12. What do you expect her to do at 32? Quit that world? Who's going to hire her? Who's going to give her a job? Who's going to marry her? All of those things, And then the whole feeling of a community. And of course, over time, she's going to retire and all of that. But we all then seek complacency and security and social health, which in some sense, gets provided by the community you are living and spending your time with. So things like that, it does get kind of intense sometimes, and mostly I would say enlightening, to step into people's shoes and see the world from their lens rather than putting your filter on their lens and saying, that's how your world is.
No, that's a beautiful realization. It's just like, what she said, interpretation is a powerful weapon, use it wisely. How often do we judge other people's, like I made a commitment to myself not to judge how anybody else makes a living. I did that a long time ago, and it freed me up for so much in life to be open to so many different ideas, right? Who am I to judge what other people do for a living? Like somebody values it if they're willing to pay for it.
Yes,
it might not be me, but somebody does.
Brad, it's so beautiful you say that. And I'm so glad. And it sounds so interesting the way you just framed it, because I was in a village yesterday. I just got back from a village where we hosted the Ghost Village Festival. So just to kind of give a context to you and the audience, in the summer of this year, we painted the life lessons of an entire community in this abandoned ghost village in Uttarakhand in India. And now it's become the first village of life lessons in the world. So I interviewed every single member of each family and painted those life lessons on their abandoned houses in the village. And there are 12 families remaining out of 300 because of migration. Everybody moved out. And to just increase the livelihood of those 12 families, we hosted a 2-day cultural village experience festival. Over the last 2 days. And I was taking the guests and the villagers on a walk. And one of the villagers told me about a story about a particular house where the monkey chaser of the village lived. And I said, what does that even mean, monkey chaser, And they said, no, we are farmers, we do agriculture, and we would be so busy sowing things and reaping things that the other part of the mountain and the other lands would be left abandoned, and monkeys would come and take off the things and the fruits and the vegetables. So we hired this man 60 years ago. This is 60 years ago. He was officially, his name was Mola Ram. He was officially the monkey chaser of the village. Everybody paid him a certain amount to shoo away the monkeys. And I was thinking, we talk about alternative careers today. How about that? All you have to do is chase away a monkey all day, as long as you've lived. So I love that you don't judge people by how they make their money, because that's an interesting way too, and maybe a way of coping and surviving.
And I think you're inviting judgment on the way you make money too, right? Everybody has their shtick, right? The thing that they were here to do. That guy was there to chase monkeys at that point. And it's not like it has to be his whole life's calling forever, but you have a
Exactly.
purpose for a reason or a season or a lifetime, and that was his reason or his season, and
Hmm.
there's no judgment about it. It's like, hey, if this is what your best and highest calling is right now, maybe there's something to that, and you should follow it.
And
And if it
and I'm
changes,
told that
change.
absolutely, and I'm told he saw service in that. He just didn't see money or like whatever, stupidity in that. He saw a sense of purpose in shooing away people and saying, okay, I can do this and this is wonderful. So I think that's more powerful, that how do people perceive their own realities and how do they construct their own worlds.
Yeah, it's almost the difference between ego and spirit, right? The ego will say, "Oh, I can't be a monkey chaser." Right? That's not
Yes.
the life I carefully planned out for me. But as man plans, God laughs. It's what happens. Life is what happens when you make plans. So I really love that you're collecting these little stories of wisdom because you're unlocking things in people that they didn't know were there.
Hmm. I mean, yeah, in some cases, I would say unlocking, and in some cases, just taking a moment to accept and
Yeah,
embrace what they have learned.
I like
A
that.
lot of times, what in life we're just moving at the speed of light, really, knowing things but not doing better. And as Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better. And I,
Mm.
I, I really hope this medium of Project Fuel in my work can serve as an instrument and as a channel for that. Chinua Achebe in his book Things Fall Apart beautifully writes that uh, I believe in the complexity of the human story, and that there are multiple ways to tell the same story. Even the same person telling the same story will tell it differently the second time, depending on where he is in his life right now. And he narrates this beautiful incident of the Ibu tribe. He says that in the Ibu festival, a masquerade dances through the main arena and people line up to see it. And the Igbo people believe that if you are rooted to a spot, you miss a lot of grace because the masquerade is moving. So you need to keep moving to watch all the movements, to watch the dance fully, to absorb it, to soak it in. And that's how the human stories should be told. That's how the belief systems, that's how the ethos and folk tales of the world should be told from many different perspectives. And that's really what I'm trying to do. Kind of lean in that thread of telling it through different perspectives. So a 5-year-old girl might tell me about patience from the point of view of holding her crayons and just getting to do her crayons, and a 87-year-old person might tell about walking from the doorsteps to the front garden and returning might take 3 hours, and that deserves patience, to a person trying to make money and saying, well, I've been saving up for a long time and I'm being patient. So you see that patience from three different landscapes of humanity, and that gives you a context to wherever you are in your story and say, that is true for me. Yeah.
Absolutely, Deepak. And where do you see this all going? Like, if you had in your heart of hearts a mission or a vision for this
Mhm.
Project Fuel, where do you see it going next? And that leads to my next question, which I'll get to in a second. But like, what is your vision now for the next 3, 5, 10 years?
My vision for next, wow, that's always, it's always the most fascinating question to me because I'm someone who's really living 10 seconds at a time. Not even, people say, take it a day at a time. I'm living 10 seconds at a time and repeating that overall. But to answer your question, I would say for all the academic papers and grant research papers I've filled in that, generally you have the questions of the 3 year and a 5 year. I think in next 3 years, I would really like to have a more have like a digital tool for Project
Okay.
Fuel to tell you concrete wise, and like maybe an app or something that we are in the process of building. But I want it to be a little more structured before we get live with it. In next 5 years, I would say um, a lot of projects in the sense of other people conducting it, not a Deepak Ramola, hopefully. In next 10 years, you should not need a Project Fuel. The organization should shut down, and I should be writing a book in my farmhouse in some beautiful mountainscape, because I don't think so that the success will be if the organization continues for a couple of 100 years. The success will be as soon as it shuts down, because that means collecting and learning from wisdom became part of the culture. You didn't need a 24-year-old boy running an organization in a remote part of India to remind people that they can learn from each other. that should come as intrinsically as it can, and hopefully then grow and evolve from it. So yeah, that would be my
You
to
nailed
say
it. And you just reminded me, like, I'm the make more marbles guy, but what if we made enough marbles and then we're good? One day that
yes,
should be the thing, right? Our big
exactly.
overarching goal is food, energy, water, and shelter in a sustainable way for every human on the planet. When that happens, we can shut it down.
Exactly. We've reached the equilibrium. What do you do after the equilibrium? Nothing. You sit and
Well, then
enjoy.
the next hero's journey begins, right? You spend some time in the real world, and then the
Exactly.
next
And
adventure begins, and it goes on and on and on.
absolutely. And because, Brad, I completely agree with you. And I believe that the purpose of life, for me at least, it's not to become a star, it's to become a constellation. I think because that's
Ah,
more meaningful and that's more riveting and that's more productive and significant. So why would I spend my entire lifetime being the star that everybody expects me to be? I'll be a constellation and then, be that. So yeah, for me that would be more significant and important in the long lifetime goal.
I love that. And you're unlocking a lot of things for me, Deepak. I think you're doing your best work right now. I really do.
I'm so
Because,
glad.
a leader doesn't create more followers, they create more leaders. And you're giving me little pieces that will ultimately allow our mission to go further faster. So we want to return the favor.
Yes.
And I know you're having that effect for others as well. That goes without saying. But we want to return the favor because this is Make More Marbles. We want to connect you to the resources, the opportunities, the people, and the systems that help you move your mission forward faster so that people can live
Mhm.
in your
Mhm.
vision, right? The vision being when you're 27 or 29 or whatever, we wouldn't need a project fuel anymore. We wouldn't need, your mission anymore because it's already just, that's what we do now.
Yeah, it's part of
So,
life.
so how do we do that for you? What can we connect you to next that will help that happen?
Oh, wow, that's so nice of you to ask. I would say the starting point would be to give as many life lessons, so that I can do my share of work. So that's always a good point when people start me how we can help. Give your life lesson. That's the most priceless, most abundant, and most useful thing for me right now that can be there. And also, of course, connecting to amazing collaborators around the world, people who are listening, if they want to join in and say, oh, Deepak, can I help you design an activity? Or I want to bring Project Fuel to this part and, want to use your activity. Can you send me your module? I would be happy to do so. So that the reach is more, the viability is more, and the use is more. And because you, uh, I mean, of course, reading about you and being so inspired by your work as well. I love the phrase abundant minded creators. I think if you continue to do that and share their wisdom and your wisdom while working with them with me, I think Brad, I would be very thrilled and grateful to
Absolutely,
you.
my friend. The feeling is mutual. I love to become a constellation instead of become a star. That's a huge piece. People giving their life lessons for sure. Do you have a framework? Because I find like a lot of my stories, like you say, they kind of can ramble or you just don't
Hmm.
kind of hit all the points. And I believe there's a very specific story structure. It's like, why do some movies really like nail it and land and everybody is like, oh, it's a great movie. And some they just kind of don't get it, right? They don't quite get
Hmm.
there. Do you have a
Hmm.
framework or have you learned over the years? You're a naturally gifted storyteller, certainly, but is
Thank
there
you.
something that can help the lesser evolved storytellers kind of get there or understand how stories come together well?
Sure. So I'll tell you, I have like taught and like spoken to nearly, wow, almost 62,000 people. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And counting. And what I've realized is when you actually go with the structure, Brad, you have an agenda. And nobody wants to talk to a person with an agenda, in that
Okay.
sense. So, first, as a person who wants to have a life lesson or wants to have a significant part of a story, then you need to listen as much as you can. I mean, and as much as you can is a condition applied with the in terms of your time, in terms of your resources, in terms of how much the other person has the energy, what's the condition like. But I think the first thing is you hear as much as you can. And the second part of it is if you want to drive a particular question, then you never start with the life lesson. That's what I do. I never start. It's my question when I'm saying goodbye to them, sitting in my car and saying, see you next time. By the way, what was your life lesson of the whole thing you told me? And I think that makes it more juicy. A lot of times when people volunteered at Project Fuel, when I was very young, so you start at 17, you're learning by the day. So a lot of people, when they joined in, they would just go and say, "What's your life lesson?" And people will be like, "What's my life lesson? You don't memorize that and walk around. That someday someone's gonna ask you your life lesson." But if you ask them, "What happened to you? What makes you happy? What makes you tick? What keeps you going? Or what's your life all about?" At the end of it, they'll tell you what they stand for. And then you rephrase. I mean, if you want a condensed, conclusive answer, I would say never ask people what their life lesson is as direct as you can. Instead, ask them, what is the piece of advice you would give to your most loved person in the world right now? And they will come up with things that will brew all the wisdom that you want, and reframe it in their words, and put it, condense and translate and all of that. But the most important tool is you be patient, you listen to as much as they want to share, you make room for vulnerability. So that means even you have to share at some point. And that's my second tip for all the people who want to be storytellers and want to document, that you cannot expect to take when you're not ready to give. So sometimes you
I
have to
love that.
open up your doors for people to say, okay, that person is really kind and I must share. So a lot of times I actually start with my story and I say, that's the challenge I'm facing this morning. And then they'll be like, "Oh, don't worry, that happened to me last year." And I said, "Oh, what else happened last year?" And then they'll tell you. So, or you ask a simple question, "What happened to you?" I think that's a jackpot question. It's not my invention, but this beautiful American theater actress named Anna Devere Smith. She won the Pulitzer Prize for Fire in My Mouth, if I'm not wrong. She said that when she went to interview people, she would ask them, "What happened to you?" And I do so too. And Brad, it's amazing how people would respond to that question. You ask somebody, "What happened to you?" And they'll say, "Oh, my boyfriend broke up with me last week, and this is horrible." And you ask someone else, "What happened to you?" And they'll be like, "Oh, I got promoted." And you ask, "What happened to you?" "Oh, I didn't get laid last night in the party I went to," or "This happened," or "I got caught." You'll get all those mixed kind of answers. So that makes the bouquet as fresh and vibrant.
I love it. Deepak, I could listen to you go on all day. I really could. This is beautiful, and I appreciate what you're doing in the world. We're definitely big supporters. Marble Makers Unite with, Project Fuel to make the whole thing, to make both our missions irrelevant after a while, right? It's like, that's just the thing that we do. We collaborate. We share our life lessons. It's beautiful.
Yes,
And we make more for everybody in the process. It's a beautiful thing. And I
true.
appreciate the work and the mission that you're on. Where can people reach out to you if they have a connection or want to connect you to bigger projects, or do they have something that they want to add and contribute?
Sure. So the website is www.projectfuel.in, and they can even go to Project Fuel's Facebook page, Instagram page. We are very active. We respond to everybody who writes to us, really. And they can write to us. They can use the resources, write to us to collaborate, bring Project Fuel to their city, their schools, their colleges, and in whatever capacity. Even if they think that a particular community needs us, we would be happy to plan our schedule if we are doing a project nearby to head there and do our bit. So they can head to Project Fuel's website, www.projectfuel.in, or write to me on my page and profile, Deepak Ramola. So that's available.
That's DeePakramola, correct?
Yes, DEEPAKRAMOLA.
I love it. Beautiful.
And do you know, I'm going to tell you something. Sorry, you didn't ask, but I must tell you that Ramola means one who's curious to know everyone's story. I discovered.
So it sounds like you were born for this.
Can you imagine the connections of the universe? It's so fast. I discovered that at 18, and I said, I'm not doing anything else. My career is my last name.
I think you nailed it. Mine isn't the same. Hart is obviously, it's a red-breasted male deer over the age of 5, but that wasn't exactly what I was meant to be. But I did get the lesson of not living in my head and living in my heart. So that was important. As long as I do that, magic happens.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right on. Well, Deepak, thank you so much for being on the show today, and we really appreciate you. On behalf of everybody in the Make More Marbles community, thank you for being awesome.
Thank you so much. First of all, I love the name of your entire show, of your entire concept. And it's been such a joy speaking to you, Brad. Thank you so much. I feel energized at like 1 a.m. in India.
Yeah, thank you for being a champ and getting on super late. We appreciate it. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for listening to the Make More Marbles podcast. For more tips, hacks, and strategies to create an amazing, abundant life in your health, wealth, and relationships, whatever that means to you, head on over to makemoremarbles.com. Check out our cool explainer video about what we're about, and join our community of entrepreneurial game changers. We want to help you level up your life in every possible way. And don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play, wherever you listen to your podcasts, and please do leave a review. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next podcast.